Hey folks, Todd here. Today we're going to install the Ascend Rack from RealTruck on this 2024 GMC Sierra 1500. The tools we'll be using for this installation are a couple of ratchets with a 13mm and 7mm socket, a 13mm ratcheting wrench, Phillips head screwdriver, and a pair of scissors. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so starting out, I've gone ahead and spread out all the components that we're going to be assembling together before we lift it up onto the bed of the truck. So we got both the sides here. We've got the cab portion up front. So we're going to start with the sides and the cab. So what I'm going to do, first of all, these sides do slant forward, so they are specific. Next, what we're going to do before we bolt this together is we're going to attach some seal. Now, this isn't sealing anything out. This is just basically a buffer. It's going to go along the bottom where it sits on top of the bed caps. That just keeps the hard steel off of the plastic bed cap there. So what we're going to do is we're going to stretch that out, cut it into place. We're going to wipe down this surface right here with some isopropyl rubbing alcohol to get it nice and clean, because we're using a 3M adhesive to stick it on there, and then we're just going to cut it in place. So let's go ahead and flip it over real quick. And I'm just going to turn this upside down so you guys can see the bottom of it real well. So here's the isopropyl alcohol. We're just going to rub this surface down. All right, next we're going to take our seal and our scissors. We're just going to roll this out. Whenever I start peeling this away, we've got two strips of adhesive. So as I peel that away, I'm gonna pull them, kind of side to side like that. Because if you're pulling both in this direction, there's a chance you can get one stuck to the adhesive on the other side. So we'll just kind of split it apart like so. And again, you don't have to worry about, sealing anything. You just want to provide a protective buffer. So we're going to get this centered on here. All right, and then we're going to take our scissors, go ahead and trim this in place. And then also, we've got the option of using our stake pocket to route things through. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut out this little area right here. So we've got a hole going through. I want to be able to access that hole and not have the buffer in the way. There we go. Now we're going to repeat the same on the opposite side. All right, so this is our cab panel right here. So I'm going to lift that up. This is the part of the cab panel that's going to sit on top of the bulkhead right behind the cab. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this seal basically right along this, this plane of it right here, because it's going to hang over into the bed of the truck. Again, we are going to clean that off with some isopropyl alcohol just to ensure we've got a good bond. And again, go ahead and peel the tape away. All right, now that we've got the seals on, we're gonna go ahead and assemble these to the crossbars. Okay, now in your kit, you have got 3 different bags of hardware. You got a bunch of washers, you've got a large bag full of bolts, and these bolts are a M8 by 20 millimeter bolt. So they're a little bit longer than these 8 bolts right here, which are an M8 by 16 millimeter. These are a little bit shorter. We're gonna save these until the very end. This is actually gonna be up on the truck before we actually even use these. So next, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on the cross members. Now, this cross member right here, I wanna point out, this is different than these 2 over here, in that this one is the only one that's gonna have a hole kind of right in the center. That's gonna be facing towards the rear of the vehicle. This is gonna be what goes over top of your tailgate area, so that's the very rear. So I'm gonna do this one last. The other 2 do not have that hole in the center, and they're exactly the same as each other. So we're gonna go ahead and work on these first. So let me go ahead and lift this up. And as I lift it up, we're gonna notice we've got these tabs that come out, these gussets. We've got threaded holes here, and also on the other side 2 threaded holes. Go ahead and set this in place. And I'm just gonna get these bolts started. We are not going to tighten these bolts down just yet. We're just gonna start all the hardware initially. And lining these up to the rear holes. All right, next we're going to lift this one up. The M8 bolts with washers. They're the longer ones, 20 millimeter. All right, now it's gonna be difficult to get them tightened down by hand. You're just gonna get it started because it does have that thread locking compound. As soon as it hits the thread locking compound, it's gonna start to lock up a little bit. So you just leave it there until we're ready to kind of run them in. But we're gonna do our second cross member, again, without the hole. Okay, and finally we've got our tailgate end bar. Obviously we've got the hole here in the center. That's going to be facing towards the rear. So we're going to assemble this one just the same way that we assembled the other 2. All right, now that we've got all the cross members on, one of the things I like to do is just kind of go back and run these in, not to where they're tight. You still want to be able to spin the washer. I like to get it in a little bit further so that whenever I set it on top of the bed of the truck, I don't have to do much as far as tightening everything down. We're going to run those in just basically with a 13 millimeter ratchet and socket. All right, repeat the same for the rest of the hardware. All right, next what we're going to do is take our cab panel and put it up against our 2 sides. So the holes that are threaded in the cab panel are going to line up behind the open holes in our side panels. So we're going to kind of bring that over like so. We're going to use the same hardware we've been working with. So it's the M8 by 20 millimeter bolts with the flat washer. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna lift this up so that the threaded holes line up. And again, just get the hardware started. I'm gonna go ahead and do this side as well. What I like to do is get the top and the bottom lined up. You have to kind of pull things into place to get the top and bottom lined up, but once the top and bottom are lined up, the middle 2 are automatically lined up. All right, now that this is all lined up, what we're gonna do is get this drawn down, and then the bolts back here that are on the opposite side of these 2 bolts, we're gonna need to tighten those down. We will not be able to use a socket to tighten those down. because there's not enough room, but I can slip a ratcheting wrench in there and tighten those down. So let's draw these down where we can still spin the washers. We have a slight adjustment in there, and then we're gonna tighten these down. Now we can go ahead and tighten these down with our ratcheting wrench. All right, now let's go ahead and work on our top supports. Okay, so here are our top support braces. Now what you're gonna notice on each one of these cross members is we've got oval holes going across. We got 6 sets of oval holes, 3 on this side, 3 on this side. What we're gonna do is we're gonna use the furthest out, but these can be modified for whatever you're carrying. What we're gonna do is we're gonna set them up on the furthest out. So when you flip this over, you'll see we've got some threaded holes here. We've got 4 threaded holes here and then 2 threaded holes here. So we're going to use the provided hardware to go up from the bottom through the slide holes into these 2 threaded holes. For here, we're only gonna use 2 of the bolts. So we're either gonna use these 2 or those 2. You just wanna stagger them. Don't do straight across, just at an angle. And then obviously these 2 here. So let's go ahead and flip that over. And then from the bottom, we'll get everything lined up. All right, so here we go. Let's go ahead and line that up. And exact same hardware we've been working with. M8 by 20 with a flat washer. And we'll get this in here staggered. Again, we're not tightening down any of this hardware yet because we want to be able to adjust things once it's on top of the bed of the truck. All right, let's move up to the front. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and get those run down to where we can still adjust, but it's closer in, and repeat the same process for the opposite side for the other support brace. Okay, now we've got everything assembled. All the hardware is still loose except for these 4 right up here that we did tighten up. We wanna make sure everything stays loose. Now is the time we can go ahead and lift it up and set it up on top of the bed caps. Before you do, it's a good idea to go ahead and clean off that back glass behind the cab. And also we've gone ahead and laid over a towel or a blanket to protect that back cab in case we bump it while we're setting it up in place. The flange on the front end here needs to hang over top of the bulkhead, and then the flanges on the inside need to go to the inside of the bed cap. So let's go ahead and get a friend, lift it up and set it into the bed. Okay, now if you have the multi-pro tailgate or multi-flex tailgate and you have the tailgate handle that sits back here at the back of the bed, that will need to be removed before this can come down. Fortunately, it comes off very easily. You just need a 13 millimeter. So I've got a ratchet with 13 millimeter socket here. I've got a bolt here and then 2 nuts here that have a bolt plate that will come out from the stake hole pocket. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull that off. Okay, next what we want to do is make sure that everything is nice and square with the bed. Make sure these are all the way up against our bed caps. And also make sure this is pulled all the way back against the bulkhead. All right, now that we've got everything lined up where we want it, we're going to go ahead and install our clamps. In your kit, you're going to have these brackets. These are basically clamps that hold this onto your bed caps. So you're going to have some threaded holes on one side, and then it's going to come up on the other side like so. Now you're going to notice up towards the cab, we've got 3 holes. We're going to use the front 2 where we're mounting. And again, we're going to use the same hardware we've been working with, the M8 by 20 millimeter bolt with a washer. We're just going to loosely install these all the way around. and then make sure everything is where we want it and tighten it down. All right, the second one back, we've got 3 holes there again. We're going to use the front 2. And the third set back, again, we have 3 holes. We're going to use the rear 2. All right, now we'll go ahead and repeat the same pattern on the opposite side. Okay, next what we're going to do is go ahead and start tightening everything down since everything is nice and lined up exactly where we want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the clamp from the inside and lift up, make sure it's all the way up, and then start tightening down the hardware using a 13 millimeter. We're going to bring it to about 14 foot-pounds. Come back and do the next one. And same for the last one. All right, now go ahead and repeat the same for the opposite side. Once you're done with that, we can go ahead and start tightening up all the rest of this hardware. Make sure everything is nice and straight and square where you need it, and then go ahead and tighten everything down to 14 foot-pounds. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our side support panels. Now, I want to point out we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations that these can be attached to. You can really attach them anywhere you want, depending on what kind of gear you're going to attach things to. Just since we're not putting anything on it right now, just for symmetry, I'm going to use the second one and the fourth one. So I want to also point out these are side specific. So the rack does kind of slant forward towards the cab. So you're going to want to find the ones that slant forward. So if you find one that's a mirror image of that slanting the other way, that's not the one that you want to use. That's going to go on the opposite side. This is where we're going to start using the 16 millimeter, the shorter bolts. We're also going to use the 20 millimeter, but this is where we're going to start using the 16 millimeter. Since this tapers up at the top, we don't have enough room to use 20 millimeter length bolts. So up here, we're going to use 16 millimeter, down here, the 20 millimeter. So I'm going to go ahead and get this set in place and get the hardware started. 20 millimeter down here at the bottom. And then up here at the top, we'll use the 16. All right, next what we're going to do is get them placed where we want them, get them nice and centered in, and tighten everything down using your 13 millimeter. Again, to 14 foot-pounds. All right, repeat the same for the next one down, and then repeat the same on the opposite side. All right, so here is our third brake light. This is the location where it's going to go. Now, obviously, we've got the hole in the center. We're going to be feeding the harness through there. These 2 holes in the corners need to line up with these holes right here. Now, what we're going to be using are these screws to hold that in place, but we also need to use the adhesive to hold it as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to peel back the adhesive a little bit so that we have the adhesive showing. We're going to run through here. And so that everything lines up properly, what we're going to do is fit the screws through these holes and line them up to the holes on the rack. That is what's going to ensure us to get these holes lined up on the cab itself. All right, once that's lined up, we can go ahead and bring this up to it, get just some initial tack there, and start peeling away the 3M tape. And now I'm going to go ahead and pull those little screws out of the holes so I can finish pulling the tape out. We also have the option of using sheet metal screws that make their own holes or that make their own threads in the steel. But we're using the bolts along with little flat washers to go back behind and nylock nuts. That nylock nut is going to be tightened down with a 7mm socket on the nut side, and then use a Phillips head screwdriver on the screw side. All right, next in your kit, we're also going to have these little red caps. Now they are tapered, so what we're going to do is we're going to follow the taper of this. So the wider side of the taper goes towards the center. Go ahead and set that in place. And let me get it straight here. And just pop it in place like so. All right, now we can go ahead and start running our harness. So this is the harness, comes in our kit. We're gonna have two different types of ends on it. We're gonna have one end that is a rectangular end and one that is kind of a triangular end. The triangular end is gonna go towards the driver's side up towards the cab. I'm gonna show you where to route that in just a second. For now, let's go ahead and take the rectangular end and just go ahead and snap it in place with the third brake light. All right, so we're gonna route it over. We've got some holes that are in the cross member that we're gonna use the included zip ties to tie it off to, get it nice and tight. Then I like to route it over top of these bolts here and then go through this hole here, route it down to the stake pocket. So let me go ahead and get this started here. And then along the way, we've got multiple holes in order to attach with zip ties. So we're going to go ahead and use those. All right, we're going to route that down. Now in the bottom here, there's a hole that's going down to the stake pocket. Down at the bottom of the stake pocket, there's also a small hole in the factory stake pocket. And it's actually just big enough for this to fit down through. So we're gonna fish it down through there. Now, I'm not gonna be able to get a good camera angle to let you guys see that, but you're just gonna fish it through and start working that through, work this whole cable down through the bottom of the bed. And then once we get to that point, we're gonna go ahead and follow our written instructions, because there is variation between models on how to wire this into our system. Well, that concludes the installation. If you have any questions, call the experts, visit us online, or check out our dealer portal to find the dealer nearest you.